The big usage of 2D barcode, and it is only limited really by your imagination, but essentially what it does is it sort of bridges the gap between offline and online marketing. So I'm all for using QR codes to support those areas of marketing that I think are most critical for small and local businesses. And I think the two things would be leaving reviews and getting people onto your mailing list. Hi, and welcome. You're listening to the NetBlaze Podcast, marketing ideas for small businesses. Look, if you're concerned about getting new customers, keeping the customers that you have, and increasing the revenue, the lifetime value of those customers, then you've come to the right place because we're here to help. Hello, everybody, and welcome back. Today, we're going to explore the absolutely exciting world of QR codes. So the QR code, what the heck is it? Why would I need it? Where would I even get one? What do I do with it? All that sort of good stuff. So, the QR code is essentially a newer, more advanced version of the same old barcodes, we've been using for a long, long time. You see them on every package of food. They use them in the supermarkets, along with, tons of other places. And the QR code, called the quick response code, it also used to be, when it was first developed, it was called a 2D barcode, two-dimensional barcode. So, but essentially, like I said, it's just an expanded version of that, in that it can house a lot more data in it. Typically, a regular barcode is just a kind of a long number series or sequence. But a 2D barcode can have lots of information. It can also do something else kind of unique, which we'll talk about in a second. And a few things that have happened, in the recent past have really increased the adoption and the usage of QR codes. Most recent study showed that tens of millions of households have routinely used QR codes. And that's up quite a bit from when people first started asking that question, sometime around in 2017 or 2018. So a few things have happened. One, COVID, and along with COVID came things like, we don't want to pass out menus anymore. So rather than having paper menus, restaurants would have these, coasters or stickers or whatever. That were QR codes, and people would scan them, and when they scanned them, up would come, the menu. So certainly that's one thing. Another thing is some pretty big marketing campaigns that have included QR codes. Probably the most famous would be the Super Bowl commercial in just this past Super Bowl. And I believe, I saw it. I'm just trying to remember. I'm pretty sure that the whole commercial was simply a QR code. And I think it was just on the screen and maybe floating around a little bit. So people were very intrigued enough to the point where, it actually broke their website. So it was a pretty big success. Basically, people just were presented with, instead of some flashy commercial, obviously at the very least, the production was not expensive, so even if you're buying millions and millions of dollars for airtime at a Super Bowl, but just had a QR code. And so a lot of people did end up scanning that code. And that brings me to the third thing that's happened that's really increased the adoption of QR codes, and that's smartphones. So smartphones, obviously, you need something to scan a 2D barcode with. And smartphones do that job very, very well. Years ago, even though you had smartphones, you had to have a separate app to, scan. You had to go in, you had to download an app for QR codes, you had to fire up the app, then you had to read it, and so on and so forth. As QR codes have become more prevalent, then both Apple and Android are able to just use their camera. So you just open your camera, point it at the QR code, you're done. Okay. So those three things have really combined to make QR codes just a lot more powerful. And QR codes can essentially do two things. The first is they can store lots of information in a static way, so it can't ever change. Once you create the 2D barcode and you print it on something and it's full of information, that's it. Okay, you can't change it. So, that's useful for information that doesn't change. This was the first usage of these 2D barcodes back in the mid-90s. And so people still use it for that today. For example, they might put like a Wi-Fi password in there, or something that doesn't change. Maybe even a version of a user manual, something along those lines. But that's become much less popular of a usage. And now, really, the almost all QR codes that you see are used in a more dynamic fashion, because the second thing they can do is they can force the person who's scanning it to go to any web address on the internet, any URL. And so what is that? So in other words, when you type something in a web browser, okay, you're typing in a URL, okay, and then you're going to where you said, let's go here. And so the QR code does that for you. Instead of typing something into a browser, right? So instead of going to www. Maybe it's a Frito-Lay giveaway. I just had Fritos yesterday. www.fritolay.com/giveaway/May 2022 /promotion right? You get the idea. Who wants to do all that? So instead, you scan the 2D barcode, and the 2D barcode sends you immediately to that URL. That address, that web address. And that's super, super powerful, because once you get up somebody to scan it and it forces them to, now you're on a web page, that web page could be anything, right? And while that address can't change, you can never change it with the URL, right? Once it's done, with that QR code, once it's done and embedded in the QR code, it is forever that way. Okay, so if you have 1,000 printed up on business cards, you can't change that. But what you can do, because it's an internet address, is even when somebody goes to that long URL, if that promotion has expired, you can forward them automatically without any action on their part to something else. So it's incredibly dynamic. So that's how people are using barcodes now, these 2D barcodes now, for the most part. Is they are driving people to a particular website. Even when it's pretty much static information like a menu, they're still driving you to a website to view that menu. Okay. Just quick history. These were invented in Japan in 1994, and it was originally called a two-dimensional barcode, or a 2D barcode, and it was invented for the manufacturing industry. They had sort of reached the limit of how much information they could put on a regular barcode, and they were looking for more sophisticated ways of tracking parts and keeping more data on there, and maybe having impacts on an assembly line, and so on and so forth. And so that's what drove the development of 2D barcodes. So the big usage of 2D barcode, and it is only limited really by your imagination, but essentially what it does is it sort of bridges the gap between offline and online marketing. When you put say you have a business card, obviously a paper business card, clearly offline marketing, and on there you have a QR code. And if somebody scans that QR code, maybe they can do anything, but most of the time they're going to a website. They're going into their LinkedIn page, maybe their personal website. Maybe it's a site that generates an automatic email to someone. So in other words, email me. You can scan it to just email me. Or maybe it's, scan it to get on my newsletter or something like that, right? But somehow it bridges the gap and again, this is how most QR codes are used, it bridges the gap between the offline world and the online world, because you're given a card in the offline world and you're scanning that QR code, and now all of a sudden you're in the online world from a marketing perspective. So that's one way, as people use it for whatever, their personal brand building or, connections. And we talked about using it for menus at a restaurant. There have been a lot of examples of people using it for contest entry. You can have like a nice big poster behind the register or all over your place of business, and scan this QR code to enter to win something, free meal, free service, a free consultation. It can be again, really only limited by your imagination. It could be a QR code to get information. Maybe you are somebody who is in the service industry. You're a plumber, an electrician, and you constantly get the same 10 questions asked whenever you do a certain type of job. Well, you can leave a little card or pamphlet or anything with a QR code that says, hey, if you have any questions after I've left, scan this. And, they scan it, and all of a sudden the top questions that are usually asked are answered there. So you could do something like that. You could have a QR code scanning to leave a review. That's always super powerful. We've talked about how important it is to handle your reputation management in other podcasts. And so, typically the biggest hurdle to that is actually getting new reviews or getting your customers to leave reviews. So anything that you can do, would be great. You could put QR code on TV commercial, right? And usually what they did is it went to a website that showed their company, but you could do anything. You could send it to an email list opt-in. You could send it to a contest. You could send it to, pictures of your facility. You're not limited by absolutely anything. You can put a QR code on your tabletops, on near your cashier, on posters, on stickers, on handouts. The sky's the limit. You can put it anywhere. So, with knowing what they're for, okay, and that's this bridging of the gap between the offline and the online, and knowing kind of how they work and a little bit of the history of them and so on. What should you be doing with them? I think you should use them. I think you should take advantage of, particularly if it's not like a huge cost or anything, right? Which it's not. I think you should take advantage of almost anything you possibly can, to get new customers, keep existing customers, and increase the overall lifetime value of your customers, as we keep saying here in the NetBlaze podcast. Critically important for small business owners. So you should use them because they're cheap and not very complicated. And the way you can get them is you can use software like our very own NetBlaze.com. We provide the ability to create QR codes for our customers and to put them in all these different places and help you with that. Or you can use free, if you just do a Google search for, how do I get a QR code for my company? But one of them is QR Code Monkey. It's kind of easy to remember, right? So you could use that. And what I suggest you do with them is I would look for synergistic ways to use QR codes. So what do I mean by that? I'm always harping on about what the most important things are for small local businesses to do. The old 80-20 rule. Let's do 20% of the work, 20% of these things to get us 80% of the benefit. So I'm all for using QR codes to support those areas of marketing that I think are most critical for small and local businesses. And I think the two things would be leaving reviews and getting people onto your mailing list. Those are two really big components. We just did a podcast about how important it is for email list. We're about to do a podcast on reputation management and how important reviews are. But these are two of the really core components that are critical for small local businesses. So I would use QR codes to facilitate either one or both of those things. getting new reviews and or getting people onto your mailing list. So hope you enjoyed our little trip down the exploration of the exciting world of QR codes. More and more people are using them, and I think you should too. So thanks for joining us. If you need help with your small local business marketing, please check us out at netblaze.com. We've got incredibly powerful software at an incredibly low price, and you can even get a free trial. So check us out at netblaze.com, and I will see you on the next episode.